And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to GeekWatch, a subsidiary of the monastery, the open bar of the internet. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me are two of my good brothers here in the temple, our resident Wikipedia and flamboyant flyer, good brother Flutter, and the man of 1,000 runes, the CEO of Zadari Enterprises, and the bane of my fucking existence, good brother Xanatrix.
Zadari Enterprises would like to remind you that BetterHelp is a fucking scam.
Oh, good. Oh, lovely. They're back.
That's the entire message. Go tell all your favorite content creators that BetterHelp is a fucking scam, and just like established titles, they should not accept any more sponsorships from them. What are you doing? Go do that, and then come back and watch.
I consider myself fortunate that I never got any email about endorsement from them. It would have been funny if I did, because I'd probably put it up just so everybody can laugh at it.
Yes, point and laugh.
As you should.
But this time around, we're doing something that I had planned for last week because, you know, Revenge of the Fifth. But multiple members of the staff were indisposed. So we didn't do it. So instead, I'm just saying that we're doing it to celebrate This Is the May.
I was legally dead for a single day for tax purposes.
But there's also... So we haven't done a reconstruction in a while, and this is as good a time as any to revisit that concept. Now, some of you may be looking at this, at the idea of reconstructing the Mandalorian, and going, "Why would you do that? Mandalorian was good." Well, it was for like a season. Then everybody else had to get their hands in it, and too many cooks kill the broth.
As for me, I didn't even watch The Mandalorian. Not even the first season. I was already well over the Star Wars franchise because of Disney's fuckery.
Which is understandable. And some may ask, if we're well aware of that fuckery, why do we consider revisiting? Well, on some levels, it hits the missed opportunities in storytelling checkbox that we often discuss with these reconstructions. But also is the fact that because Star Wars is a IP that everyone knows on one form or another, it can provide great study material in terms of what to do and what not to do as a writer. Because if there's anything you should be doing whenever you're approaching the idea of writing, it is study everything.
Yeah.
Whether that be as simple as just writing other games, writing other films, writing comic books studying should be important on some level. Now, am I saying that you should be studying the same way that Zan and I might do it? No. We are unique cases.
We're kind of insane. Just a little.
But you still should do some. And when it comes to The Mandalorian, the first season admittedly was great. It seemed to have its foot on proper. Second season was a little shaky, but somewhat made up for its ending and the reappearance of Luke, which is a bit amusing because of the fact that some of the ideas of the writing team. And season 3 happened, and it was a whole lot of directionless nothing. And in between seasons 2 and 3, you had stuff like the Book of Boba Fett, and then later on Ahsoka, as well as Obi-Wan, 3 shows that were completely unnecessary. And in the case of Obi-Wan, it's suspected by some that was originally going to be a movie that got turned into a Disney Plus show. And I could see with it and with Ahsoka because of how long everything feels on certain scenes and how decompressed things feel. Now, whether or not that actually happened, I can't say. I'm just saying that the pieces are in there for me to believe it.
Yeah.
But
Dragon says season 3 needs the greatest fix to make it the Mandalorian again.
yeah, I think for a lot of people, a lasting memory of season 3 is going to be the completely pointless appearance of Jack Black and Lizzo. And thank you, Vanguardian, for celebrating for the fact that yes, this is the 150th episode of GeekWatch.
And we've been doing this for a long time now, Monk.
Mm-hmm.
Even if we don't do a Geek Watch every Sunday, we do Geek Watch most Sundays, so that's about 3 years worth of Geek Watches.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm?
And well, there's going to be a lot of celebration as far as milestones for this channel throughout this year.
Indeed.
I mean, it was just earlier this month that the birthday of the channel came and went. I didn't make a big deal of it because I don't consider it the official start. The time I started my channel, for the longest time, I was just setting it up just so I could save videos that I liked in the early days. This was like late 2000s.
Yeah. When I first got a YouTube account, it was always just to subscribe and save videos and shit.
Mm-hmm.
Same here.
Now, that being said, the big reason for doing this reconstruction is the fact that you have a very strong idea that just isn't taken advantage of, and those are the kind of stories that would be fodder for us for reconstruction treatment. So, with all that said, then, as we often say, let us have a go. So, it's very clear. I remember during the early preview, where they talked about the Mandalorian armor being somewhat analogous to a knight's armor in terms of appearance, and for some designs, I could certainly see that.
So can I, yeah.
My question here is, and this is going to be very important for the type of reconstruction we might be doing, is what was his name? The main character of the Mandalorian.
Din Djarin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is he anywhere near as badass as Canderous Ordo?
He could be, but in a different way. Din Djarin, and truth be told, I think actually revealing his name or just having him take his helmet off was a bad idea. Especially in the first season, was certainly meant to be akin to the Man with No Name, someone who comes in, solves a problem, and then leaves. And a lot of the early designs and a lot of the storytelling beats of the first season came off like a Western.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, but as long as whatever we're doing with this reconstruction, we make him as badass as Canderous Ordo, I'm game.
Yeah. Now,
Canderous Ordo is the Mandalorian of all Mandalorians, and if you don't remember why, it's because he eventually becomes Mandalore the Redeemer.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Now, I think the first thing to tackle is what era something like this should be set in. Should it be set in because since the premise is such a broad concept, there's no reason that we have to set it in the era that it's set, that the canon version is set in. We can set it in pretty much any era that we want. We could do we could do the Old Republic. We could do pre-Old Republic. We could do the Imperial era. We could do the Republic Civil War era.
We could do the first Galactic War.
Yeah, the Galactic Civil War.
The first Galactic War might actually be best because that was a time where the Mandalorians were split amongst each other about which side to take.
Yeah.
And, yeah, we could even go so far as the Legacy era if we so chose. And the reason why I argue that is when you look at the design of Mando, and I'm going to stick with that name for a very specific reason. You know, completely covered up, helmet and all. You have a type of protagonist who could be just about anyone.
The eponymous man with no name you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, and I think that was what they were going for to begin with. A Mandalorian who hunts bounties, and once the child was introduced, it sort of morphed into becoming akin to Yojimbo. At least that's kind of the implication, just based on what we see. But because of that, giving the titular character a story arc in and of itself would be a terrible idea. Characters like these are meant to be static pillars that other characters build their arcs around.
Yeah.
If you need a couple examples, I'd say a big one would be Judge Dredd, but also pulp characters like Conan and the Shadow could just as apply.
Mm-hmm.
Like, their story isn't as important as the stories around them.
Half of Clint Eastwood's Western characters could apply, Monk.
Mm-hmm. Not just the man with no name, but all the other ones. And I'd also say L would apply, like from the Mariachi trilogy.
I could see that too.
So could I. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, the films are mostly revenge stories, although although Once Upon a Time in Mexico just goes all over the place.
It jumped the shark, but in a good way.
I look at it less of a jumping the shark and more of a Rodriguez on a cocaine binge.
So yeah, the Mexican version of jumping the shark.
Yeah. And speaking of which, I suppose it could also use Machete as another case.
Oh, absolutely.
And that one's definitely a cocaine binge. I will hear no argument on that.
Neither will I.
Danny Trejo is a national treasure. Which nation? The answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
But I think the best way to do a story like that, if this is going to remain, say, a TV series, because I think the concept is we still want to, while we don't want to keep it necessarily in the same era, we still want to try and keep it in the same medium, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so if you're going to do a long-running TV series, and we want to keep the idea of this unknown wanderer going around doing stuff, it needs to be an anthology show.
And season 1 kind of was that. There's several of the episodes within it were standalone stories.
Okay, and that's good. And of course, you can always have standalone stories, and a larger arc encompassing them. That's a thing that happens in a lot of anthology shows. One that we've talked about a lot that is not technically live action. Well, I mean, not technically live, it's just not live action. Cowboy Bebop. It is an anthology show, but it has overarching plots that eventually tie in.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So that's still certainly something you can do to try and build up a nice climax for our nameless hero, the Mandalorian himself here. He doesn't even necessarily need to be a hero, just a nameless force that moves along the stuff that he touches and then moves out again.
Yeah. And
reminds me of Sunset Story from Live Alive.
Yeah. I'd also say, if I have to use another example, let's consider, say, Demon Slayer.
Hmm.
The the perspective character in that series isn't the titular Demon Slayer, but Priestess. Uh, Now, one could argue that it becomes more ensemble in later seasons, but she's the audience surrogate regardless.
Yeah.
Nezuko is? Is that what you're implying?
Oh. Not, I meant Goblin Slayer. What the fuck am I saying?
Okay, yes. Okay. Goblin Slayer and Priestess. Yes, Priestess is basically
Yeah.
the audience pillar.
Um, in my defense, I'm coming off of a hurt shoulder, so some things get cross-wired.
People are going to ask how that's relevant. I'm going to tell them to shut the fuck up right now. But yeah, when you said Demon Slayer, I'm like,
Yeah, no,
okay.
yeah, but with Goblin Slayer, Priestess, she was the first character we spent the most amount of time with, because Goblin Slayer in the first episode doesn't show up until the third act.
Yep. And saves her.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to even in the Carl Urban Dread isn't the one who has the story arc. It's Anderson.
Yeah, Dredd just does what Dredd does best.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
hell, one could argue with Helsing, the person who has the real story arc is Ceres.
There's
It's definitely Ceres.
A little bit less so in the third act, but that's because her arc had pretty much finished.
as soon as she drank Pip's blood, her arc had completed, and now we needed to complete the story of the Helsing organization, the Millennium group, and Alucard.
Mm-hmm.
But that's beside the point.
Yeah.
The big thing I'm getting at bringing up some of the examples I did is that these stories feature a character we love just on the basis of how cool they are. Like, let's be honest here. If we look at, say, The Man with No Name or A Fistful of Dollars, Clint Eastwood's characters between both are near identical in the way they act. And we just love them because they're fucking kick-ass.
Mm-hmm.
The story's a bit nonsensical in both of those movies.
Yeah, and I've picked on Dave Filoni, and I know he was a writer and director on some of the early stuff, but as I said before we went live, Filoni is at his best when he is the guy who works with the guy, not the guy.
When he has someone to help him, give him guidance, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the type of feel that we should go for in this reconstruction is that Mando is a person who, once he gets to a place, for whatever reason, his presence starts big shakes and moves.
Mm-hmm. And because of that, I think when it comes to, well, first off, when it comes to the question of what era we should be dealing with, there's no one right answer. I would be perfectly fine with leaving that kind of thing ambiguous, because since we're dealing with so much of the Outer Rim, and since we're doing that anthology, that's not going to be as important.
The only thing is that whatever era we put it in, people will automatically make the assumption it isn't the era of the Empire or the New Republic if we don't have stormtroopers / clone troopers going around.
Mm-hmm.
So, as they can make that assumption, but reminder that the Empire and the New Republic, and even the Old Republic before it, didn't really do a lot on the Outer Rim.
So,
yeah, they really didn't.
I would be perfectly fine with putting it several hundred years after the going more into like the Legacy era, in the sense that the Republic is there, but it's like this distant thing where a lot of people don't even know if it's even there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and since we'll be in the Outer Rim, it won't matter if it's there anymore.
Yeah, the Outer Rim is meant to be analogous to the Wild West. It is,
The
Yeah.
frontier days.
and I know some people say that it's lawless. It's a case where it's not consistent. You're going to have some planets that are microstates in and of themselves. You're going to have some planets that are pirate kingdoms. You're going to have some places where it's complete anarchy. But it is
Uh-huh.
not consistent. If I had to use an analogy, consider the periphery in BattleTech.
If I had to use an analogy, the rest of the world during the age of discovery and piracy.
That true. That as well.
Huh?
So because of that, you could have some places that look like Coruscant style metropolis, and you have some places that are complete wastelands. Now I know it would be tempting to have at least one story in Tatooine. No, we don't need to do that. There's plenty of desert.
Yeah, no.
Tatooine should not be the only desert planet in the galaxy.
I hate sand. It's rough and it's coarse and it gets everywhere.
And especially since when we're dealing with a bounty hunter, there's not a strong reason for it to stick to one biome.
Yeah, not really.
We're gonna pull a Miyazaki. More swamp planets. God damn it.
um,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Louisiana would love to have love to give out tax credits. I know Georgia does that a lot. That's why you see those made in Georgia things at the end of a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm. There are
But
two types of Miyazaki swamps. Go to Louisiana for one and Florida for the other.
mm-hmm. But I would say that, and this is the other reason why I'd want to set it so far into the future. In doing that, you can have this idea of the Mandalorian as a myth, as this legendary figure. Most people have probably never seen a Mandalorian. They've only heard about them through their exploits in past wars.
Which is sad because even in the extended universe novels, the only reason Mandalorians were a myth during the time of the Empire and the time of the New Republic being stood up is because they had hidden themselves from the world, not because they were near extinct.
Yeah,
Well,
that
hidden
was
themselves from the galaxy, I should say.
as far as whether they're hidden or extinct. I would leave that ambiguous for the purposes of this. Or an alternative is that the myth is one that's carefully calculated.
That would certainly be the way, wouldn't it?
And that was kind of hinted at in season 1, where there was that enclave, but everybody just knew it, but a lot of it wasn't known. Uh, and because of that, you can have this idea of his job being to maintain that legend. The much in the same way that when the white hat cowboy comes into the saloon, everybody stops to look at the stranger. That's the kind of effect that the Mandalorian should have if he's going into a certain place.
I think if it's any place that has even a remote understanding of Mandalorians, many of the people would make the assumption that he's the new titular Mandalore. And he'll do nothing to disabuse them of that fact.
Mm-mm. Even if his name is asked, just him saying, just call me Mando, or something like that, saying, it's not my real name, but for the purposes of doing business, just use that.
Alternatively, he'd just be like, "You can call me Mandalore," and leave it. He wouldn't even say he wouldn't continue. He would just say, "You can call me," and that's it.
Yeah.
That's the type of character this is.
Now, I would say that the first few episodes of this would build around that kind of anthology. Like the first couple would just be random jobs. Him going into the bounty hunters guild and taking a particular bounty.
Or people hiring him direct when they see him at a cantina.
And I would say, I know that there was that line of I can bring you in either warm or cold, but I would probably put a bit more inevitability in that statement, in how it's delivered. I.e., I'm taking you no matter what. It's just a matter if I take you alive or take you dead.
I mean, you could make it a more badass statement by saying we can do this the easy way or you're dead. You know, we can do this the easy way, or we can do this where you're dead.
Yeah,
you make the choice.
I would say do two before kicking off the actual story. Do two standalones. One that involves bringing somebody in warm. Usually some sort of capture thing, and that one I'd say is the second quote unquote story of having him sneak into a place and grab his target without creating too much of a scene. You know, as far as who the target is, let's say it's the son of a politician or something.
Sneaks into his quarters, blaster under his chin.
Mm-hmm.
You got two choices: the easy way or the dead way.
Mm-hmm. The other one would be taking out a rival crime lord who's holed up in a particular old base. And while the base is old and has been around for a long ass time, the weapons still work, which is why they'd want somebody a little less obvious. And I will admit, with something like this is mainly to have one big action set piece. And if you need an example of what sort of set piece to utilize, there's two sources that I'm drawing upon.
You just want a Kurosawa set piece. I know you.
Normally you would be right, but I'm not channeling Kurosawa with this. I'm channeling the Raid.
Okay.
Both the Raid and one of the chapters in Warren Ellis's run on Moon Knight, Scarlet. You know, where he's just going through people like a slasher villain and refers to himself as the one you see coming.
Okay. I can see that. I still think that there should be a Kurosawa option somewhere.
Oh, there will be, just not yet.
Good, because we need our Zatoichis.
Mm-hmm. But the sole reason that those two bounties would be the first two is to establish two things. One, he's very good at combat, and two, he's very good at knowing when not to use it. Because some bounties they just want them dealt with, just one step removed from a hit job. Other ones require a bit more discretion.
Yep. So he's good at the tools of his trade.
Yeah, it's to illustrate that the tools of his trade are varied.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as, especially when you consider the various bits of gadgetry on Mandalorian armor, it's not far removed from the various forms of options you would see, say, Iron Man have.
It's not different from seeing how people in small special operations group in real life kit out.
Mm-hmm. And That would also mean that it would be best to have him have some sort of melee option. I know there's the whole thing with the staff in later seasons in canon. I think it.
Let's give him the thing that we almost never see in actual live action Star Wars, but always in the games, a vibroblade.
Yeah, I would say a collapsing vibroblade.
Vibroblade, and it doesn't even have to be like a vibro sword, but just like maybe something about 1.5 feet long, like a vibro short sword.
I was gonna say a variable length one, and the sole reason for that is so you can have your quick draw moment.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, I get
Oh
that.
yeah.
No, that's fun. We can have that.
Mm-hmm.
We can keep it.
You know, so, because just because he is, as it would be tempting to have him as just a gunslinger, given the inspirations. The approach we're doing is that he's just as much of a gunslinger as he is a knight or a samurai.
Well, you also referenced the raid, which means he's going to be doing hand-to-hand as well.
Yeah,
And a lot of it.
The way I visualize his particular brand of hand-to-hand is extreme efficiency. Certainly rough about it, but it's a case of his job is to find a way to disable you or take you out with using as little energy as possible. But with the assurance that you're not getting back up for a while.
As little energy as possible, but the assurance that you're not getting back up for a while. I know what your inspiration is, Monk.
What?
Kempo.
Yeah?
Kempo and Wing Chun.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
If we wanted something more explosive, but that's also going to use more energy, I would then also go Muay Thai, but Muay Thai is very dynamic, and you're going for something a little just straightforward, get you down on the ground now, and that's definitely Kempo and Wing Chun.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
But having those kind of tools, and the fact that it's demonstrated that he has a variety of tools to deal with opposition, helps add to that legend of this is Mandalore, do not fuck with him. You know, we have it where people like Canderous. Well, just his presence alone is enough to make people think twice.
Yes.
Or
Canderous Ordo was a badass.
Or that whole thing where you first meet Mission and Big Z in the Old Republic.
Oh yeah.
You've got some folks trying to hustle Mission, and then Z shows up and they're like, whoa, we don't want any trouble with a Wookiee.
Let the Wookiee win.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
But the actual story. This is where the bounty in question is the retrieval of Grogu. And
are we still going to have Grogu?
Yes, but not in the same manner, because I do think it would be a good idea to still have the lone wolf and cub kind of dynamic.
Except in this case, the Mandalore is the cub, because Grogu's actually a very aged version of Yoda's race.
Yep.
I'm mostly joking.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing I would still have it as a young, but as far as who the client is, who would be after that particular child, I would say it would be as tempting as it would be to say some imperial remnant. I would actually go with the idea that multiple factions are after it, i.e., the idea of being able to control a Force sensitive would make a lot of powers in the Outer Rim very, very concerned and would either want it dealt with or want control of it.
Yeah.
And since we're dealing with this variety of clientele in the Outer Rim, that could just as well be things like gang lords, actual respected politicians, or anything in between.
Mm-hmm.
Huttese crime bosses because they always exist in the Outer Rim for some reason.
Yeah.
I don't understand why the Hutts are always criminals.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't get that either. Or they're always written to be evil.
if we had to use a Hut, I'd probably go with the idea of a Hut who actually went legit and wants nothing to do with the quote unquote family business. Even
got
though
a
he's
better
using
idea.
similar tactics.
I've got a better idea.
What?
The Hutt remains
What?
neutral because he's a legitimate businessman running that branch of whatever bounty hunting organization exists in that part of the Outer Rim.
Mm-hmm. And and he's more concerned with making money, not getting himself
I don't
involved
need
with
I don't need to. What was the line? Hold on. He doesn't need to be involved in hokey religions, Monk. I'll use that line instead.
But hokey religions are bad for business.
Yeah, his would be, I don't need hokey religions or your assurances. Money is always key. Variation on Solo's line.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
But for him, it's all about he's
All about
bounty.
that. All about the credit.
Though
Mhm.
I wouldn't go with him being greedy, but pragmatic.
Yes, getting involved with it with a Force sensitive is way too much risk. In a risk benefit analysis from a business perspective, fuck that shit. I will lose way more money and probably my life. Just send the Mandalorian to fetch him and we'll be good.
Fetch him, put him somewhere else, and do not bring him here.
Yeah, you do not bring him near this entire sector of the Outer Rim. If you do, I'm voiding the contract, and you get fucking nothing. That's gonna be the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
And well, even though he has a degree of freedom in a ship that he can use to to go anywhere he wants, ships need fuel and maintenance, and he also needs maintenance because, well, just because everybody's using energy weapons doesn't mean that they have infinite bullets.
Well, then,
Yeah.
of course, he needs maintenance in the fact that food and water are things.
Mm-hmm.
That they are. On top of blaster parts.
Yeah, and the because of that, obvious you can have it where he does raid the place where the child is being kept, and has a bit of a change of heart and decides to look after it instead because the drop off place that was assigned is in the middle of nowhere. It is literally a planet that still has an atmosphere, but is not habitated at all, and that's a bit too much for him.
Well,
Yeah.
that's also a fucking red flag to anyone in the business. We're meeting on a dead planet? Fuck no.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck no. That's way too easy for you to just bombard me. Eat shit. And then, of course, he'd have to reach out to the Hut again and be like, I'm not dropping this kid off. The Hut's going to be like, the fuck are you on now? And he's going to be like, well, they're asking me to meet here. And the Hut would look at it and be like, that's a trap. And no, it wouldn't be an Admiral Akbar because as much as we love that meme, this is a Hut being pragmatic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a trap. He's like, yeah, I know. He's like, okay, here's what we'll do. We'll cancel the contract as half completed. You'll get half the payment, and then never come back to my office again until that kid is gone.
Anyway, guys, I'm going to head out because my laptop's. I need to charge my laptop, but I also need to feed the pupper. So.
All right, stay frosty. Man.
See you later,
Stay
Flurry.
frosty. See you tomorrow, guys.
Mm-hmm. So
You're gonna have to adjust the reactive portraits, aren't you?
not this time.
Oh, you learned. Good.
Yeah. So, given there are certain actors who show up that I'd be perfectly fine with with I guess rejiggering to have them appear if only if only in a different
Roll.
role or even name.
So
I
this is our chance to re-employ Gina Carano. Got it.
Yeah, and because of how we're running this, the whole her getting fired over dumb shit politics never happened,
We're not Disney.
and I would say that there's two ways to bring in Cara Cynthia Dune. One option is her being another bounty hunter. The other, given Gina Carano's background, I'm actually considering this. She'd she is she was one of Mando's teachers.
Um, the real problem with that is that if she is one of Mando's teachers, um, she can't be in too much because we've already established that Mando is going around doing a lot of stuff by himself and is kind of upholding a legend all on his own. Having too many other Mandalorians in this show would defeat the purpose of that myth.
I didn't say that she was one. Just that she was the one who essentially taught him hand to hand.
Again, I don't know about that because what we know about Mandalorians from actual extended universe materials, and I hate calling it legends because fuck you, Disney, is that the Mandalorians taught their war tactics within the clan.
Mm-hmm.
So the way a Mandalorian learned to fight was from his clanmates.
In that case, another bounty hunter would probably be the better option.
Yeah, because I know we said we wanted to blow up a lot of things here, but I want to keep some of the EU stuff alive because that shit was interesting.
That, and there was no reason to blow it up.
Exactly.
Especially since afterwards the people involved are like, we don't have the kind of background that we can build upon like Marvel does, and everybody's like, motherfuckers.
Points to the entire bookshelves of EU books and the entire comics and the entire all of it. Fuck you. Well, we don't have the established lore. No, you do. You just decided to say that it wasn't.
Mm-hmm. I think the only reason they called it Legends was to try and placate people who would have burned the whole place down. When you're telling them that decades worth of material is somehow irrelevant.
Yes. And yes, Dragon, the extended universe is better than Disney because we have the most badass version of Luke Skywalker ever.
Mm-hmm. But I would, in that regard, I would say that having her as a different a bounty hunter from a different sector
Mm-hmm.
is perfectly fine. And I wouldn't even go with the idea of her taking a bounty on Mando. That wouldn't make sense. But it's just that they happen to be working together on a similar quarry.
Yeah.
And right in the middle of it, Grogu ends up showing up, and Kara ends up realizing you're in a lot more shit than you told me.
Well, and now the real question we have to have here is: do we want there to be like a business established history between them, like they've worked together on previous bounties when necessary before.
I would be perfectly fine with that.
Like nothing super in depth, just like, hey, this is a multi-person bounty and we're working together and you're a Mandalorian, so yeah, I'll have your back, you have mine, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they've done that, probably over a few years of bounty hunting in these particular Outer Rim sectors.
Yeah, and you can have a bit of awkwardness when she says that she's going back to the guild to get her share, and she's like, well, why don't you come along? We can catch up at a cantina. And he's like, I can't go back there. Like, why not? Because if I go back there, I don't get paid.
We'll have to go to a different planet for drinks. She's like,
Yeah.
the hell did you do? And that's when Grogu shows up.
Mm-hmm. And the sole reason that she's tagging along is the realization that with that many people who are going to be gunning for the kid, even if he does not want to admit it, he's going to need backup.
And she's tactful enough to just be like, hey, it's the same thing we've always done. I got your back, you got mine.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to the, I know that when it came to the Imperial remnant that showed up, Moff Gideon, I would still be fine with having him present. I mean, how am I going to say no to Giancarlo Esposito?
Of course, he wouldn't be a Moff because this is hundreds of years after the Empire's fallen.
No, he would just be. I would go with the idea that after the Empire fell, a lot of people who still held that rank descended into being pirate kings, essentially.
Yep. And this is just a descendant of that particular Moff.
Yeah. If anything, the title Moff became less of a Imperial officer rank and more of a title among those descendants.
Yeah. And so meeting him would be something like his Mando gives no shits, so Mando's not gonna like kowtow and kneel. But this guy's lackeys would be like, show some respect. This man's descended from the great Grand Moff Gideon. Who are you? And he'd just be like, Mandalore.
Mm-hmm.
Which would saying that one word should scare the lackeys.
Yeah.
If there's a lackey who isn't scared and goes to try and put Mando down, Mando should cut off his arm.
Mm-hmm. And in fact, I'd say that probably Moff's right hand tries to do it and loses his arm.
The right hand lost his right hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it wouldn't even be there's two ways you could do it. Either it's a sudden moment right in the middle of a meeting, or it's a case where he challenges Mando to a duel, and the duel only lasts about 5 seconds.
Nah, I like the first one. It's far more abrupt and makes a bigger impact if, like, they're coming in for this meeting for whatever reason. Mando's there, Kara's there, Grogu's back on the ship for obvious reasons. And
I'd say the premise is he is appealing to the leader on that area in order to get passage to do his job.
Yep, and so he shows up. Obviously, this person is probably sitting on some sort of pirate throne.
Mm-hmm.
Pirate kings tend to be, egotistical that way. And when Mando is still just standing there instead of, they're expecting him that like everyone else, he'll get on his knee and make a supposition, or not a supposition, a supplication. There we go. Mm-hmm. That's the word I was looking for. That's when the lackeys are like, get on your knees. The great descendant of the Grand Moff Gideon is here, and he broke no quarter from any of you. Mm-hmm. And who are you to still stand, Mandalore? And maybe this right hand man, this top lackey just doesn't think the Mandalore is real. Doesn't think Mandalore as a Mandalorian is real. Doesn't even think Mandalorians are real anymore. Maybe to him they're just all dead, and it's just this boogeyman, kind of like John Wick was for a while. And that's when he's like, "You're not gonna kneel. I'll make you kneel." Hand comes out. Hand goes on ground. Screaming lackey rolling on the ground. And that's the necessary act of violence to impress upon everyone. Yeah, don't fuck with Mandalore.
Yeah. And in that same vein, someone else who I'd want to bring in is Fennec Shand, and because of her setup, you don't really need much in the way of a background, but I would have her as essentially a rival to Mando.
She wants to see if she can outdo the great Mandalorian.
It's more that she would be a representative of the less noble end of bounty hunting, the one who's more of a straight up assassin than Mando's approach.
Someone who just kills, takes the body, takes the money, and leaves.
As opposed to Mando, who would do what is asked.
Does what is asked, and does what will get. He also does what will get him the most profit with the least amount of effort. If he doesn't have to shoot somebody, that's one blaster bolt saved. That's less money he has to spend down the line, and that's more money he gets. So she's like, so she probably would almost see him as somewhat naive.
Maybe even because you can go with the idea that her background was as a full-on assassin before she did a job shift to bounty hunting, but old habits die hard.
Yeah. Well, I would also think that, legends of Mandalorians are all over the galaxy. And I'm sure that some of the legends talk about their great prowess in combat and war and how, they made sure to completely vanquish their enemies. And so she'd be like, you can't possibly be a Mandalorian. You don't even do what Mandalorians are supposed to do. And he's like, Mandalorians only follow the way, and you don't know what that is.
And do you remember how in Kamen Rider Geats at the end of every episode there was a list, not a list, but a rule of the Desire Grand Prix or its
other forms,
successors.
Yeah. Yes, I do remember that.
I'm thinking either at the beginning of every episode or at the end of every episode there is a tenet of the way, because I feel like the way should be his equivalent to Bushido or the code that the Jedi have, and we have what's listed for the Jedi code. So I think if we're going to keep using the phrase "this is the way," we need to have that.
Well, what's really funny is that the way actually, I think, is derived directly from Bushido, because Bushido just means the warrior's way.
But the point is that each episode kind of illustrates that isn't just a catchphrase; it's something that the Mando lives accordingly to. And by having those entries that show what the do's and don'ts are, in relation to the episode where they're shown, you can better establish that to the audience.
Yeah, you can flesh out exactly what the Mandalorian way is.
Now, I will admit that there are some characters who show up that I would have no desire to bring back in any way. One of them being Bo-Katan.
And I have no idea who that is because, as I said, I've watched none of the show.
She first appeared in in Clone Wars and Rebels as part of the Death Watch faction of the Mandalorians,
Okay.
but the problem is her presence doesn't really contribute enough to what we'd be doing, and as mentioned, you'd want to keep the amount of Mandalorians that are seen to a minimum.
Yeah, because you're trying to build on the mystique of this single Mandalorian who just calls himself Mandalore and fights like no other, as a Mandalorian should.
If another one does show up, he would also refer to himself as Mandalore.
Yeah. And that could actually be part of the way. You know, we are all Mandalore.
Yeah, I am Spartacus.
Yes. And it would make sense to do so after, hundreds of thousands of years of persecution to build themselves into this monolithic monomyth.
But I would say the biggest threat when it comes to the different factions would be the Moff. And as far as his plan, I would say that he is very much a scholar who acts in his own interests. You know, that type of well studied military commander, just in the form of a warlord. In his case, he studied scraps of the old legends and actually believes that there is truth to the stories that everybody just writes off.
So this descendant of Grand Moff Gideon is much more intelligent than people give him credit for. Is what you're saying?
For lack of a better, until I can come up with a better name, I'm going to call him Gideon the 15th.
Okay. I mean, a few hundred years would give us that, especially with all the anti-geriatric treatments that probably exist in this type of futuristic world. What I would think is if that's going to be the case, Monk, if he's much better studied and more intelligent than people give him credit for, I want to give him another moniker, and I'm sure you might be able to guess what it is.
I can guess, but go ahead.
The Shadow of Thrawn. If he's that intelligent and is the only one who really thinks of the potential in these legends and is much more crafty and astute than people give him credit for, then he's acting just like Grand Admiral Thrawn did.
Yeah. Now, I know we brought up Thrawn and the like when we did our reconstruction of the sequel trilogy. That is not going to be present here because by this point, so much time has passed that Thrawn is long dead.
Yeah. The only person who might show up from I guess you'd call New Republic era is going to be a Force Ghost. And that's the same Force Ghost that's been around throughout all of EU. After Luke died, he just hung around for forever, I swear to God. And he did it just so he could continue to fuck over Palpatine.
Oh.
This is why Luke is the GOAT.
So you would have Luke as a Force Ghost who would still show up.
If we have a Force Ghost that needs to show up, that's that. First of all, that'd be the only one who would show up from that era, and it'd be him for sure.
Yeah, I would. But
we don't necessarily need it if the story doesn't need it.
But I would say that actually an approach to do this would be, as he's trying to find a place where he can at least drop off Grogu, he ends up hearing about the legends of ancient sorcerers called Jedi.
Because at this point, either the establishment of a new Jedi Academy failed, or all Force sensitives have just kind of have lost training potential because there's nobody left to train them.
And I would say that in do, in trying to do the in trying to trying to find a place for Grogu. One, he ends up getting a bit more attached. You know, seeing the child more or less as his own kid,
Mm-hmm.
and two, this would be the spot to have Luke show up as a Force ghost and giving him the advice to go to Tython.
That could be a way. I think. I think. That if that's only if we want to use, you know, a Force ghost in this case. If you think that that's the best way to convey the information, then sure.
Mm-hmm.
If there isn't really any other way, that also makes sense. Now, I'm going to cut something off at the pass that I know some people in the audience might think about. No, Mandalore is not a Force sensitive. No, Mandalore would not become a Jedi. Yes, I know everybody wants to be a Jedi, but no, you're wrong. Not everybody wants to be a Jedi.
The approach that I was thinking is that he ends up going there. He ends up seeing what's left of the old archives.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't much left because it's been thousands of years since anyone's gone to these places.
Mm-hmm.
But what does happen? What he does encounter instead is the different ghosts, and it's not just Luke there, but plenty of other Force ghosts who are able. He's able to see, but he's not able to hear them. Whereas Grogu is.
Yeah, and really the only reason he can see them is because he's around Grogu. If you were separated from him, he'd see nothing.
But the line that keeps popping up in my mind when it comes to this is, you cannot be a Jedi, but you will be a knight.
I mean, that was already obvious. And, you know, basically, I think what you're going for here is that they might assign him as protectorate in this case.
Yeah, basically, they will teach him, but the next quest that's given is he will forge a lightsaber.
Not for himself though. Can't possibly be for himself. He doesn't have the Force sensitivity to build one by himself.
No. He'll create the pieces. And create the instructions for Grogu for when it's time.
Yes.
But what he'll make instead is akin to the original Force swords.
Okay.
And that is essentially his replacement for the vibroblade he's been using.
Yeah, I can see that. It's going to be something that's going to be really hard for him to get used to. We'll have a training montage for that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because there's no weight in the blade, or at least not a lot, compared to his old vibroblade.
Mm-hmm.
And two, even the old Force swords, the requirement to use them effectively was usually being a Force sensitive. the using the tools of the Force sensitive was usually, the prerequisite is, well, you're Force sensitive. It is only because Mando is in constant contact with Grogu, and the fact that I think Grogu has been trying to communicate to Mando somewhat telepathically using the Force, just because Grogu can't actually talk yet.
Mm-hmm.
That he's able to see the Force ghosts when around Grogu in the first place.
Yeah. But it is essentially making a sword out of Durasteel.
Yeah. Sword out of Durasteel that still requires some force sensitivity to use.
But it would nevertheless be heavier than the vibroblade he was using, but also significantly um more effective.
Mm.
And I know it would be tempting to bring up the whole being able to block blasters, but I would go one step further. Um, this sword is able to cut through shields.
I could see it. It's been long enough, and the Force Ghosts have probably been tinkering long enough to make a force sword that can cut through shield technology.
Yeah. And while this is more sword than the energy of say a lightsaber,
Yep.
it's still him training and studying. And normally in this kind of situation, the study would be through ancient texts. In this case, he's been through with Grogu as somewhat of a medium, because whenever he's around the kid, he's able to see and somewhat communicate with the ghosts. He is able to communicate with multiple ghosts that teach him, which is an easy way to have a bunch of cameos that fit within this.
Yeah. And also, they don't really communicate with him via words. It's more through concepts and icons.
Mm-hmm.
Like it'd be kind of like the little scenes that you'd get before doing any of the psychometry, where you touch stuff to see past scenes in the Jedi Survivor and Jedi Last Order.
Mm-hmm.
That you would see just symbols, and the symbols mean something, and he's taught those meanings through repetition.
Yeah.
That way, and he's a Mandalorian, so he's gonna get it.
Yeah. And the other thing that comes out of this is
Grogu getting training as well.
Yeah, and the culmination of that is him finally being able to speak.
He at least learned words.
And if you want to keep him perfectly silent, just have him speak through the Force or something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it would be more convenient to speak through the Force to someone he's that close with.
Mm-hmm.
Because it would be. I also think that all of the Force ghosts that appear should not just be Jedi. I think they should be Force sensitives that were famous in general.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because technically Mara Jade was never a Jedi, even after she married Luke. But she'd be there for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Revan would be there. I'm sorry, but if you don't have Revan in the lineup, that's a mistake.
And I will admit, even though that while I I know it'd be tempting to bring in Boba Fett, and my approach to that would be he's there, but not. Like the original isn't there, but in one particular place, his armor became a ancestral relic.
And so it's being handed down through a Fett family lineage of some sort?
Yes.
Okay. Even though his armor is now horrendously inefficient and never worn.
The big reason I'd want to bring him in is the appearance that that Tamura Morrison had when he first showed up in the series was an episode that was directed by Rodriguez, and Rodriguez saw that the best way to bring him back is to bring him as a barbarian, as opposed to Filoni, who wanted to do a more Don Corleone approach, which didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, the Book of Boba Fett got nuked for this.
Makes sense.
So instead, I would I would go with the no I would go with the notion that the armor while it is certainly less efficient than Mando's armor because it hasn't been properly maintained. It
Or
can
upgraded over the last few hundred years.
it is far more of a symbolic gesture.
Yeah.
And
It's like wearing a dress uniform to a state function.
um but not but some parts of it have been able to be maintained, specifically the jetpack. The which, as a bit of an aside, I did like that these mythical names were given to a lot of the equipment. Um, like the jetpack was referred to as the Rising Phoenix, for instance.
It seems a little chuny, to be honest.
A little bit, but if we're going with this notion of the past becoming this new mythology, giving those sort of fantastical names to maintained equipment would certainly fit.
I can see it. It just strikes me as a little chuny.
Then again, according to some people, I'm a little chuny.
Is the black dragon in your left arm going crazy there?
No,
Nope. Only the bane of your fucking existence going in crazy in your ears. That's all.
I'm just saying for some the line is a little bit low,
Oh, I know.
but the big the big reason to showcase something like that is to illustrate that just because they're referred to as crime families or pirate kingdoms or the like, not all of them are outright evil. I know that several stories in Star Wars have that dividing line of absolute good and absolute evil, but if you're trying to do a frontier kind of story, you can't really do that. They don't mix. They can mix. I mean, there's the white hat and the black hat for centuries, but a lot of people when they look at a space western in that regard, they're going to be assuming a degree of shades of gray.
Which is completely understandable.
And it's important to carry the idea that you have that within the Outer Rim, you have a variety of people. You have some people who are good guys, some people who are bad guys, some people who are doing what would be bad things, but not outright evil. Some of them pragmatic, some of them just looking out for their own.
Yeah.
And I'd say our Fett is one of those kind of situations. Will he engage in piracy? Yeah, but it's to feed the people who are under his care.
Yeah. Now, something I think that should be important to establish before we get to all the training montages and everything in this, planet, is that I think Mando would have sent at least off 2 messages at the closest relay before going into hiding with Grogu, specifically to Kara and then our Hutt friend, letting him know, hey, I found something, so I'm going to be incommunicado for a while. Just letting him know, hey, I'm fine. Nobody's found me. I've just got to do stuff. Because after all, he doesn't know how long he's going to be on the planet.
And as far as how long said montage would go, I'm thinking less than a year.
I could see that. I mean, Grogu, despite being a child of the race that still doesn't have a name, and I'm not going to say that they're. I'm not going to agree with Disney, who apparently said that they're called Dagobahs because Yoda was on Dagobah, but it was never implied that Dagobah was Yoda's home, just his hiding place.
he was in that place. He was in that place to hide, if only because of the fact that Dagobah was what would be in Warhammer 40k a death world.
Yep. It's the Catachan.
Mm-hmm. And so, which makes it a perfect hiding spot, because when you can't go 5 feet in that place without stumbling into some kind of death trap, nobody's gonna want to try and go there unless they are brave enough or stupid enough.
Or have the right special powers, such as being a Force sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
But, after Order 66, there weren't many Force sensitives left.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, even though being a child of whatever Yoda's race is going to be called, he's still, like 60 years old or something like that, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not going to take long for him to grasp what the Jedi are telling him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually probably going to take longer for Mando to grasp what's being told to him, because it's told to him all through symbology.
Although I'd imagine that as time goes on, he does start to figure it out.
Oh yeah. If Mando couldn't figure it out, he wouldn't be able to finish up his training.
Mm-hmm. And because this kind of thing does eventually lead to a confrontation with Gideon the 15th. And this is where you can have your season-ending big battle. And yes, this does involve the two of them having a sword fight in the middle of a burning Jedi temple.
There's our Kurosawa.
I told you it was coming.
Oh, I know. I knew exactly where you're going when you pulled us to a Jedi temple, monk.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I see where he's going. I'm also going to say that at the end of this, Gideon gets away.
He does get away, and throughout all of this, it's revealed why this one was so important, because the question would inevitably be asked: there's no doubt plenty of other potential Force sensitives that could be utilized for some sort of end. Why this one?
Mm-hmm.
And you can have the revelation that Grogu himself is special, not just because of being a Force sensitive, but being able to detect other ones.
He has the ability to find other Force sensitives, which is why he could see and communicate with so many Force ghosts.
Mm-hmm. Essentially, somebody could use him kind of the way Cerebro is used in X-Men.
If they wanted to, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So he's a way for somebody to finally get their hands on a Force-sensitive army.
Yeah, and
now the real question is, why do they want a Force-sensitive army? Is the Yuzhong Vong coming back?
I think for a lot of the people who would be looking for it, it'd be having people with the kind of Force powers that they've been told through myths and legends would be a boon to expanding their power base.
It's a Force multiplier that is too good to ignore, even if it's not as good as the legends suggest.
Mm-hmm. Like they may hear the stories of them being able to manipulate people's minds and think, oh, I could use that to manipulate a war winning before it even starts.
Not realizing that the Jedi mind trick is not that powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It's for small things.
It is a nudge. It can't be used for that sort of effect. And anyone who has any measure of actual political power isn't going to fall for it.
Well, that and the fact that if you really want to get into the science of brainwashing with the Force, well, you don't use the Force. Look at how Palpatine convinced Anakin. None of it was Force.
Mm-hmm.
All of it was just talking.
Now, I know there's the concept that's brought up that Toydarians are immune to it. I don't think it's a case of immunity. It's a case of too strong-minded to fall for it.
Yeah, you think Watto wasn't just immune because of his race. Yeah. Well, I mean, we do know that there's the concept of plants and other flora and fauna out there that are at least resistant to the Force.
Mm-hmm.
They actually disrupt the Force itself, to the point that Force sensitives feel like this sense of almost like someone putting cotton in their ears, I guess is the best way to put it. A damping of that Force presence.
A lesser version of the effects of blanks.
Yeah, if we're going to compare it to 40K, sure. It's a damping of their force senses, to the point that it's actually extremely uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I remember reading that in the Thrawn trilogy, and I was like, that is a very cool plant. Timothy Zahn, you are a fucking genius.
And well, nobody really wants to, for multiple reasons, nobody wants to be around a blank. Not just because, although in some cases, like a certain friend of Caiaphas Cain, it's not just because of the fact that it's a blank, but because he fucking stinks.
No,
supposedly because the Caiaphas Cain books are written from an unreliable narrator perspective.
I know they say Cain is an unreliable narrator, but nobody ever contradicts him.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, what?
I do think his driver just stinks that much.
Yes. But be that as it may,
mm-hmm.
in the end, that reveal of, hey, these people want him because he can find all the others, and then they can build an army. And that at that point, you might like this, I can think of this all as like a season finale. This fight in front of the big temple, this big reveal. It's obviously a season hook.
And I would, in order to make it so that they're on even ground.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that I would actually go so far as to say that he does have, if not the Darksaber, a Darksaber.
Maybe a copy.
Probably. I'd leave it ambiguous whether it's the original or a copy. It could be that he reconstructed it based on schematics that he found.
Which means it wouldn't be a very good Darksaber.
No, but as has been demonstrated through both Shiro and Shiro, even a copy of a legendary weapon can still have its use.
For anyone who doesn't get that, go play Fate Stay Night.
Mm-hmm.
We're specifically talking about Shiro and Archer Emiya.
And more specifically, the whole tracing thing.
Yeah,
like
Unlimited Blade Works.
All of the tracing that's made through tracing or through Unlimited Blade Works are technically one grade lower than the original Noble Phantasms.
Yep.
But one grade lower doesn't mean useless.
A one grade lower Excalibur is far from useless.
Mm-hmm.
When he started tracing Excalibur, that's when Archer panicked. It's like, fuck. But yes, it's inferior to the original, which means it isn't going to be a curb stomp battle for Gideon. But it is enough to put him on the same edge as a trained Mando with a Force sword.
There is one concept that I am considering.
Mm.
While we're not going to make Mando a Force sensitive or anything like that, what about the concept of Grogu channeling the Force through him? Essentially using the Force to aid Mando.
clarify a little more specific. How so?
It could be interpreted as battle meditation. That's one form of it. It could
Okay.
also be interpreted as him channeling the force through channeling force-like effects through Mando's body. Essentially, the two of them acting kind of in tandem with each other.
Okay. I think it'd be more realistic to have it be battle meditation because, we've already got the giant cast of Force Ghosts. Bastila Shan could be there.
Mm-hmm.
And especially because battle meditation was known not to just increase the battle prowess of Force sensitives, but everyone. So that way non-Force sensitives could still benefit from it. It would make a lot more sense to do it that way. I don't think that there's a lot of evidence of Force users channeling the Force through non-Force users and non-Force sensitives, mostly because I think technically that would harm the non-Force sensitive.
Fair. It was an idea I was tooling about with.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely understand. I'm just trying to fit it within lore and make sure it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, hey, we have all these fucking Force Ghosts. I already mentioned Revan was there. There's no reason for Bastila not to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So Bastila teaches Grogu, battle meditation.
Yeah. The big reason for that is I'd want them to be evenly matched. Because if we're going with this, as I do think that even though he portrays himself as a scholar, Gideon the 15th would still be a very capable fighter.
Mm-hmm.
That's the primary reason why he's able to have so many followers who are going to be so loyal to him.
Yeah. Porkchop pointed out that there is lore for Force mind control, but it's not actually the mind trick or anything mental. It's literally Force pushing by pushing on parts of the brain. So you have to have an intimate knowledge of a very intimate anatomical knowledge of the brain, because otherwise you'll just either kill them or make them brain dead. He says it's from Darth Plagueis lore.
Yeah, fair.
But I do think the battle meditation is probably the best use there.
Mm-hmm. But I do think that at the end of it, he right when it seems to really not be going in Moff's favor, he ends up getting away.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly by using a distraction. So it's a case of it's the classic case of forcing a moral decision. Let the villain get away or be the hero.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the fact that Mando is not as ruthless as other bounty hunters, or even as the assassin we talked about before is, he would take that route.
Mm-hmm.
Since I think the key thing is that even though some bounty hunters have a reputation for being ruthless, he's not ruthless. What he is pragmatic.
Pragmatic and efficient.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And doing the job with as little excessive damage as possible is part of his creed.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as what Gideon the 15th would bring with him, some of his elite soldiers who I would say that they have a heavily modified version of trooper armor. But
Mm-hmm.
when I say heavily modified, I mean the outline may look similar to trooper armor, but lacking things like the helmets.
Mm-hmm.
and is definitely nowhere near as clean. It ends up looking more like the armor of a barbarian tribe than it does of a standing army.
Mhm.
Because I do think if I was if I was producing this and having people write it, I would have people study pulp, sword, and sorcery and say we need to be bringing this into a galaxy far, far away.
I could see that. Pork Chop says uh, that one particular way Gideon could possibly get away. Back Grogu into a prepared trap meant for Mando, like an explosive to drop a pillar on him or something.
That's certainly one way. Um, and because this is one of those big battles, all of Mando's allies that he's made up to this point would be seen helping him out.
Kara went to the hut and was like, "I'm going to need a half an army of bounty hunters."
And well, there's an easy way to get them on. Simply state anybody who's willing to that I would imagine that the hut that we've mentioned really, 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 really doesn't like Gideon.
Oh yeah, Gideon causes shit in his sector all the time, and it pisses him the fuck off.
But because of the fact that he's technically in another sector and there's rules about not going into other people's turf, he can't do much.
Yep.
Uh, and it's for that reason that if say the Fett clan decides to raid Gideon's turf, um, if you could easily have a scene of Gideon complaining like, what, why'd you let the Hutts blow up my ship? I'm like, oh, your ship blew up? That's a damn shame. Basically an unspoken agreement of, as long as you fuck up his shit, I will look the other way.
Exactly.
And if it sounds like I'm turning Fett into the Fett clan into Corsairs, I've already mentioned Pirate Kingdom, so why not? Though I'd say he's more akin to a raiding party from say any Norse tribe you can think of.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and because of that, I would also go with the idea that him and his clan are very, very good at understanding the routes when it comes to the best approaches to utilize hyperspace. Because remember, Vikings were expert sailors before they were fighters.
Yes.
But there's the question of, okay, how do you do the expert sailing thing when everybody has light speed jumping?
By avoiding gravity wells so you don't tear your ship apart and rip it out of hyperspace.
I would say that they have the best understanding of like nav computer tech when it comes to their ability to jump into hyperspace.
They've probably programmed their own assistance programs that are more efficient than what's on the market.
Mm-hmm. As far as the rules of jumping into light speed, I don't think that's ever been established aside from you're jumping into a parallel dimension and then coming out. But it's not as opposed to say Traveler, where the rule is your every jump is 5 days in hyperspace, but the stronger engine you have, the more distance you can cover.
Mm-hmm.
The approach that I'm thinking is that they understand that certain configurations allow for more ground to easily be covered, and moreover, I'd also say that they understand one concept that we don't see a whole lot of in Star Wars, though we saw a fair bit in Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
Stealth tech. And Brian says there's speed involved and there are paths and hidden paths. So there's our answer there. They know the hidden paths more than anybody else in this region.
Makes sense.
Uh, the because because if I'm gonna go with this idea that the reason why nobody tries to just overwhelm the Fett clan is it's really really hard to find them. I mean, you might go, wait, but their base is on this planet, and by the time you get there, they're already gone. You know, there's the whole thing that made tracking pirates tricky is that it was hard to chase them.
Yeah.
So this would be in a similar vein, but in the aftermath of it, um, while he while Gideon would decide that the Jedi project would be a failure, but he would look at other means and ends up going to a old planet that once belonged to the Trade Federation, and going through the ruins of that, what would be a tease for a future story was that he'd find schematics for battle droids.
Mm.
You know, the battle droids that would have been used in the Clone Wars, especially super battle droids. I mean, yes, which was you kind of had something like that with the robotic version of the Death Trooper project in the actual show. And the concept of robotic Death Troopers is something that's been used before. It was used in Dark Forces. Which, anyone who writes off Dark Forces as just a Doom clone of Star Wars, it's a free country and you are free to be wrong. And you are very, very wrong. And in the case of in the case of Mando and the rest, because of the fact that Grogu is able to sense other Force sensitives, you can have Mando and Grogu continue to go from planet to planet, taking jobs in the Outer Rim, but this time to track other Force sensitives, because Grogu had decided that the best option for him, instead of finding some place where he could hide out, is use Tython as the place to build a new temple, a new order.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's also a good opportunity to bring back a concept that we kind of talked about when we did our reconstruction of the sequel trilogy, and that is the idea of a Jedi Pathfinder.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying we'd revisit that, but the idea is a order of protectors when it comes to the Force, making a new home in Tython, with the new first of the new, the way Luke was when it came to the new Jedi Order, is Grogu, with Mando acting not as a Jedi but again as his knight.
Yeah.
If I suppose if you were to jump forward into how this would look, you could easily have Grogu have kind of the appearance of of an Asian emperor.
Mm-hmm.
With Mando as the right hand, someone who's certainly not Force sensitive, but has many other talents. Much in the way Hugo is not just an engineer, but someone whose coat buttons up tight over other duties. Yes, more people should watch Sharp. Just don't lose the king's colors. And hey, it's one of the rare cases where Sean Bean survives.
Actually, I remember there being like a study done, and he's survived in more movies than he's died in. But the ones that he's died in are the bigger movies he's known for.
Hmm. Which is kind of, it's not as much of a curse as say being Leomon in a Digimon season,
Hmm.
which that was an accident.
Stop hitting me with that. It's not nice.
Hmm.
They keep doing my boy dirty.
Oh, I know. At the very least, I will give credit to Bancho Leomon for being the one who went out the best. Yes, I'm going that far.
Well, I know.
But I think now, as far as other potential spin-offs, I would keep that to an absolute minimum. I would not do a if you're gonna do Book of Boba Fett, instead of doing it as him transitioning into being a crime lord, have it as him creating his own set of rules for when he inevitably finds a successor. Not Boba Fett specifically, but call it the Book of the Fett, or
Well,
something along those lines.
I don't think that'll usually be necessary, though. I think if you design the main Mandalorian show just fine
Mhm.
in the first season, the second season should be able to spark.
Though I don't think doing spin-offs when you haven't finished your first story is a good idea. We learned that the hard way back in the comic end of things, all the way back in the 90s, where there was that
Clearly,
vicious
we.
cycle of a character gets introduced, gets a bit of a following, then gets his own spin-off book just so that they can have more number ones that are collector's item.
Hmm.
Uh, if you're gonna do spin-offs, do them after your protagonist has finished their arc. And I do, but the I will admit that part of the reason I just of all the eras I went with, what I went with this far future, is because leaning into this more kind of Howard-esque approach would be an angle that would give it its own identity, but
Yeah.
also we'd be significantly less bogged down with the need to have any sort of cameos to past eras. There would be no need for member berries. Everything would stand on its own. The
Yeah.
closest thing we'd have to member berries is things like the armor of whoever's leading the Fett clan, or or having a hut, or having a descendant of Gideon.
Yeah. They're cameos to as nods to uh, the universe's lore itself. I mean, you'll see many of the different aliens you've seen before. It's going to be there. It's just
And
not going to be
that was the
directly.
I should note that was the reason why BioWare went into the distant past with Knights of the Old Republic, because the option they had to do was before the prequels, or do a story in during the Clone Wars. They had felt that if they did a story in the Clone Wars, it would have been lost in the shuffle because there were so many different games that were set in that era that came out around that time.
Hmm.
Now, I'm not disparaging some of those games. I mean, Republic Commando is fucking great, as as well as stuff like the Epic Battles board game, which I still have,
Mm.
but they would have been lost in the shuffle. Whereas setting it beforehand, they've got a lot more freedom to do things the way they'd want to do it, and they wouldn't have to worry about paying ridiculous amounts of money for voice acting works of some of the actors from the films.
Yeah.
So, because I mean, if you as far as doing spin-offs that focus on secondary characters in this, I actually think that's a bad idea. And the reason I think that's a bad idea is consider what happened with the Pirates movies after At World's End, where the focus was on Jack. Now I can understand why. I mean, Jack is a fan favorite and all of that. The problem is he's one of those characters who needs some sort of anchor to build around so he can do his shtick.
Mm-hmm.
When you have that kind of side character having to carry a story on their own, it doesn't work as well. Now, granted the films post World's End tried to fix that by having him have this comedy duo relationship with Barbossa, but I wouldn't say that exactly fixes the problem, just replaces it with a different one. Like I remember when there was talk about having a Rangers of the New Republic series that was going to focus on Cara Dune, and like that would not work. And while we saw with Book of Boba Fett how that didn't work, and we saw with Ahsoka how that didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
As much of a fan favorite as Ahsoka was during Clone Wars, a lot of it was due to her having that contrast with Anakin and the relationship that they had, rather than her on her own. Even when an older version of her was used in Rebels, it's one of those things where you can't focus solely on her.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if you're gonna do spin-offs, do it after the fact. And if they are going to be spin-offs, don't just have it of, hey, this character you like, here's more of them. You can't have too much of a good thing.
Yeah, you want to keep your cameos special.
And I know whenever I bring this kind of thing up, some people will throw Wolverine at me, but Wolverine worked solo because originally he was solo. Like his earliest incarnation was a villain in Hulk.
Yeah.
It was just late. He was just later integrated into X-Men, but didn't need to be in it, as opposed to some of the other X-Men who definitely wouldn't work as their own character, as their own protagonists.
Mm-hmm.
Like, could you see Cyclops soloing his own book?
No, because he's kind of... Cyclops works best while teamed up with the rest of the X-Men.
Yeah, the same applies with a bunch of the X-Men, and it's the same principle here.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that some comic book historian could list some issue that I've forgotten about, that where Cyclops was solo.
But what we're trying to say is that as a character, he works best with the cast he's part of.
Mm-hmm. There are just some characters who are going to be built for that kind of thing. And when you have an ensemble, taking a piece of that ensemble and trying to spin them off doesn't really work.
Mm-hmm.
If I have to use a non-nerdy example, not as many people watch the Cleveland show as maybe watch Cleveland in Family Guy. I know that one's a bit of a stretch, but I think you see where I'm going with.
Yes.
Well, that and sitcom spin-offs rarely work.
Mm-hmm.
I think they've only worked like half a dozen times in the last 50 years. But the big thing with something like this is trying to do the Mandalorian in a way that's replicating what came before is going to make it stand out less.
Mm-hmm.
You'll notice that that with the style that we're going with, we we're not going with the familiar story beats, and in fact, I wouldn't even try and emulate the typical Star Wars scoring, or even use the even use the familiar opening crawl.
Yeah.
If I was in the production seat, I would do the one of the watchwords would be, "We are not, and we are not what came before. We are in that world, but we are not trying to replicate it." Um, if I had to use an example of this sort of thinking, did you ever watch the Batman back in the day?
The Batman?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, that series is a bit divisive, but I recall one of the producers saying that if we try and do anything like um, TAS, we're gonna be screwed. So we need to endeavor to not do that. And one of the key ways of not doing that was their portrayal of the Joker, or just dropping the part of it in his name. You, you know, having him with a much different look, looking more like a Harlequin, and wearing that straight jacket and having more of a monkey like fighting style, who could actually hold his own against the Bat. All in the name of making him different than what came before. And yeah, in later seasons he ends up wearing an outfit that looks more like classic Joker, and to his detriment, even dropping the hunch that he seemed to have. But the point is having it be different to establish its own identity. And truth be told, as much as ridiculous as this may sound, you want to know who's one band I would potentially contract to handle scoring?
Ooh.
Wardruna.
I could see Vodruna.
Wardruna, The Who get a lot of more folk style music. Even if possible, get the composers for a lot of the Halo games, and some of the composers for Destiny.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is to have that is we are doing a juxtaposition of this sort of future tech in a world that's steeped in old myths,
Mm-hmm.
much akin to a Conan-esque story. Since one of the aspects that a lot of people conveniently forget about Conan is it is in some ways depicting a post-apocalypse, because it is dealing with the after effects of the fall of Atlantis and the fall of a lot of the major civilizations. That kind of in between spot.
Yep.
And with this sort of approach, we're dealing with a world where technology hasn't stagnated to the point of primitiveness, but a lot of the major technologies and major powers have faded into myth.
Yeah.
We are dealing with a setting that I would say is at least, I don't know, 2,000 years after Return of the Jedi.
Yeah. So the new Republic has come and been established, and may even be gone. You never know.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still a bunch of things that are passed down as legend. So there's still influences from that time.
Mm-hmm. And it's for that reason that I wouldn't want to get a space opera kind of soundtrack. I'd want to get a more primal sound, a lot of drums and horns.
Which I can see.
And in that same vein, instead of having the opening crawl in the traditional sense, having it actually I know I can just keep the way the opening worked in the core show. It was that theme that had a more Wild West approach, and then the title and the credits being a display of concept art, and a lot of the concept art is really fucking good. Um, and Dragon points out Thundar the Barbarian. I can see that, but that's a little too on the nose. The there's a lot of stuff within the lore that is that in this hypothetical is kept very ambiguous, and the reason for that is to establish that primal like theme.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this idea of mythology in future tech,
Yeah.
which there aren't a whole lot of franchises that really touch upon this concept, but it's a concept that is worth exploring, especially in a setting like Star Wars, where there already is a hybridization between the fantastical and the technological.
Mm-hmm.
But that is going to cover it for this particular episode. We will be back next week with something a little different. I was tempted to do something wrestling themed because next week is May 19th. If you know, you know. But no, that's not what we're going to be doing. That being said, there are some other things we do have planned. Um, specifically, we're jumping from talking about space operas to talking about spy fiction. So that should be interesting. Of course, tomorrow morning I'm going to be doing an interview with Homie and the Dude talking about their expansion project, The Wandering Tavern. And Porkchop brings up Remember 2 Kid. I was tempted to live stream playing MechWarrior, but nah. It's fun given what dropped on my lap earlier today. It's funny you bring up something mech related.
Mm-hmm.
Tomorrow is Motherfuckers Day, as has been dictated by George Carlin. But after that, it's going to be a bit later than normal. But Zan and I will be doing a emergency Valley of the Judged on Eldritch Automata.
Yep.
Since when I originally covered that during its first Kickstarter run, that didn't pan out. I was kind of flying blind on the concept. I was building more on my experiences with the Year Zero system. Now that I actually have a quick start to work with for their upcoming crowdfund that starts next month, I'm not letting this opportunity slide. I want Eldritch Automata to succeed, and I'm going to do everything I can to make that happen. But beyond that, Tuesday and Wednesday I've got a couple interviews I'm going to be doing. Thursday will be Monarch and I looking at Velocity. Now, I'm probably going to take down that tweet regarding the schedule because I realize there's a bunch of things I need to correct. Specifically the fact that him and I aren't doing Curse Brand next week, but actually doing Velocity, which of course is a TG project.
Yep.
But Friday, you and I will be delving into the newest season of Valley of the Judged with Gubat Banwa.
Yes, we will.
Yep, and of course Saturday will be, unfortunately, the only time this month that we'll be doing Demon's Line for Cloister of the Dice.
Which is unfortunate.
Unfortunate, but it's a combination of having to follow the rules and previous issues. But at the very least, we've had better luck than a lot of people when it comes to consistent sessions.
Also true.
And of course, And of course, there's going to be a few surprises along the way. Those aren't the only things that I'm doing. And the last thing to note, the week after next will be the Q&A session for Legend Edition. Remember that you have until just before midnight on the 25th to submit any advanced questions you want answered. If you submit it after the cutoff, I'm not going to acknowledge it, and I'll know if somebody submitted it late because conveniently Google Forms has timestamps for each submission.
Yep. So get your questions in now.
Now, if you're showing up during the Q&A and you've got questions, then I'll answer them then. But the advanced questions are there for people who either want something prioritized as a question or can't make the stream.
Yep.
So, like Yoshi P often says, please look forward to it. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra, I am your gaming monk, and join the watch. Magitech Knight.
Could be. I'd have to take a closer look at them.
I do know that the lances in Anthem would be.
Mm-hmm. But a lot of people don't care about the lances because, well, they don't care about Anthem.
I'd also say the armor's in Knight, but that's not out yet. Well, not out in English, let me clarify.